Hi, my name's Jack, this is Seen It, and today I want to ask you all a question. What's scarier, a monster you can see,
ugly motherfucker,
or one you can't? Not sure? Alright, let's look at a classic example.
Ripley.
Yes.
Close all the hatches behind me.
Here, a man named Dallas is on the hunt for an alien.
This is where he starts to feel that he's in trouble.
This is the last time he saw it, and it seemed like something a human could handle with a flamethrower.
Dallas?
And so, when Dallas runs into this, it's a shock. For us, for the characters, for everybody.
What? And end up like the others?
And this is because, much like the alien, we've been kept in the dark. Outside of these three tighter and out of focus shots, we don't know what the alien looks like. Until now. And as Parker states,
"This son of a bitch is huge. I mean, it's like a man, it's big."
In any traditional monster movie, this is a pretty normal narrative structure. A quick introduction, a jump scare, the reveal of the big baddie, and the subsequent chaos as it picks off the remaining characters one by one. But Alien isn't a normal horror movie, as director Ridley Scott explains.
And I always remember having this argument with some of my colleagues at that particular time, including the studio, where they kept saying, but nothing happens for 45 minutes. And I said, well, that's the whole point, because once it starts to happen, I think we should have them. And
Scott's phrasing here, have them, refers to a movie's ability, particularly in horror, to captivate an audience, build enough suspense, and then surprise them at the perfect moment. But this surprise doesn't happen until 75 minutes into the movie.
Oh God, it's moving right towards you.
Which even for the most patient of horror films is a long...
I don't know how many minutes we're in now, but nothing's happened yet.
Long time. And to emphasize how little actually happens up to this point, the only other jump scares are at 38 minutes and 48 minutes.
Dallas?
And the first truly horrific scene occurs at the 55-minute mark. It's slow, it's patient, but that's the point.
But I know there was kind of a little bit of paranoia saying, God, nothing happens for 45 minutes. I'm saying, yeah, but look what you're looking at, you know, and you're looking at these guys waking up. You're getting information all the time now.
And this information proved that there's a huge benefit to going slow.
One more meal before bedtime, I'm buying.
Hey, that's a break.
Big time.
And I think the subtext to each character was really intelligent and gave you enough to know who was who, right? The troublemakers were Harry Dean and Yaphet Kotto down below, and the upper deck of the upper echelon. So you have a universal or classical separation of the classes, even in space.
Ripley, this is an order. Open that hatch right now. Do you hear me?
And it's this patience, Alien's aversion to action, its almost obsession with hiding its monster that makes it so tense, but also feeds into its reputation as a generic anomaly.
Two of the most successful genres of the last 5 years have been science fiction and horror films, and Alien is both.
You mind if I give it a shot?
Please do.
You see, no one wanted to make Alien in the early 70s.
I read it and I thought it was absolutely terrible.
The script was too weird, the combination of sci-fi and horror was reserved for old B-movies at the time, and so the project was shelved. Then, in 1977, this happened. The rest you already know. Star Wars made a whopping 77 times its initial budget, science fiction became the hottest new genre in the industry, and therefore production companies scrambled to greenlight any sci-fi projects they had on their desks.
They wanted to follow through on Star Wars, and they wanted to follow through fast, and the only spaceship script they had sitting on their desk was Alien.
So they hired a little-known commercial director, Ridley Scott, who'd only released one feature film, The Duelist, threw together a cast of dramatic actors and Hollywood newcomers.
Scorny, this is your first film. Your background is mainly New York stage, right?
And audiences didn't really know what to make of it.
Reviewers are going to take a very cautious approach to this film.
The film was criticised for being too gory, too violent, with sci-fi fans expecting something more family-friendly like Star Wars, and reviewers saying stuff like this.
A lot of young people are probably going to want to see this picture. They love horror films. This one's pretty bloody. It is pretty violent, and I think a lot of people, adults and kids, are going to be turned off and maybe frightened too much by it.
But as Scott explains, this isn't really true.
I think a lot of people who have seen the film feel that they seem to have seen a lot of the elements that you just mentioned, but in fact there aren't. I mean, there is only one scene in there that contains any blood whatsoever.
The one bloody scene he's referring to is, of course, this very famous, visceral chestburster moment.
It's all handheld, and then you go to, boom, that's a airline inside his chest, inside his vest.
And yeah, it's pretty disgusting, that's the point. But other than that, Scott is right. His big, scary monster movie is clean and simple and relies on something far more nuanced than gore for its horror.
The idea of using these long shots, I think, are good because it allows the audience to work as well. And it's knowing how long you should draw out the tension before they start to get fidgety.
The main cause of this tension was a lack of clarity around the film's villain.
What the hell is that?
So Scott kept it simple. Keep the monster out of sight, keep the tension high, and let the audience imagine something even scarier. For instance, Brett's death was originally supposed to be witnessed by Ripley and Parker. But Scott changed his mind in the edit.
Somehow that was too normal. It was more elegant to leave in to die in a lonely fashion and then come to them here. The cat was the only witness.
This is also true here when Ripley hears the alien claim 2 more victims.
Get out of the way,
Lambert! Lambert!
Her death is heard, and it's probably more frightening by hearing it rather than seeing it.
It's worth mentioning here that Scott clearly isn't the first one to do this. In fact, there's another famous movie only 4 years earlier that also hid their monster.
The shark didn't work as well or as often as it was supposed to work according to the screenplay. This
is, of course, Shaw's director Steven Spielberg, and he's discussing the technical problems they faced with Bruce the Shark.
Well, the first mistake with the shark was they made a big mistake and they built it for fresh water.
And how these problems forced Spielberg and his editor Werner Fields to hide their monster.
Werner was always in favor of making less to be more. And I was trying to squeeze that one more, because it took me days to get the one shot. So I'm going back to, I'm on a barge for 2 days trying to get the shark to look real. And the sad fact was the shark would only look real in 36 frames, not 38 frames. And that 2-frame difference was the difference between something really scary and something that looked like a great white floating turd.
Whilst he didn't experience the same technical problems as Jaws, Ridley Scott took this minimalism to a new level. Looking at the numbers, H.R. Giger's terrifying creation is only on screen for a total of 74 seconds, which is only 1% of the entire film. Yet still, the alien makes such a lasting impact because of the creepy design, the ominous score, and also how Scott filmed the movie.
I think what we've managed to do in the film here is always put the audience in the place of the individual about to die. So I think we've somehow touched on something which makes the audience very vulnerable to what's occurring, which I think is why it's particularly frightening.
This very intentional point of view handheld cinematography was directly linked to Scott's decision to operate the camera during the shoot. Sure, Derek Van Lint was responsible for principal cinematography, but Scott was usually operating at least one of the cameras.
There was his choice of lenses, it was his choice of where he was going with that particular camera.
This is directly connected to his previous commercial work where he liked being behind the lens and allows him to think about the edit while shooting, encouraged him to control the pacing.
Ridley was really subjective.
And helped him stick to his predetermined horror rules.
The most important thing to do is not employ tricks. If you're doing a horror movie, disregard the tricks that have been employed before. That's what this kind of genre needs, is you've got to keep coming up with original ways of sustaining the tension.
Now a relic in a franchise that's had 6 films and 2 bloody and gory spin-offs, this original film feels painfully slow by comparison. The Xenomorph is the clear star in the modern movies, and with facehuggers, chestbursters and acidic blood, it's an ingenious biological weapon that people, including myself, love to see in action.
Get away from her, you bitch!
But at the end of the day, I personally think that Ridley Scott's decision to keep the monster off the screen and let our imaginations magnify the horror was much more scary.
How do you feel about it in retrospect? How does it stand up in your own mind?
Alien.
Alien.
Wow. Well, you get so far separated from it now, you know, it's like you didn't make it. But yeah, it's a good movie. It's a good film.